In 1893, a children's book was published in New York City. The main character was a wealthy, golden-haired boy of enormous ego and relentless ambition. He lived in a place called Castle Trump. His adventures began in Russia, and he was guided by a mysterious figure whose name in the text is simply Don. The boy's name was Baron Trump. Donald Trump's son is named Baron. His mentor and closest ally for decades is a man named Don. His empire is built around the name Trump, and his political rise began in significant part with a story involving Russia. The book was written 130 years ago by a man who died in 1918, who never met Donald Trump, who could not have met Donald Trump. So what exactly is going on here? That is the question that has been circling the internet for years now, growing louder and more uncomfortable each time someone adds a new layer to it. Because the name is just the beginning. There are more coincidences underneath, and some of them are harder to explain away than others. Let's go through them one by one. The author was Ingersoll Lockwood. He was a New York lawyer, diplomat, and writer who published 2 Baron Trump adventure novels in 1888 and 1893. The books were mildly popular, briefly reviewed, and then forgotten for over a century. They were not famous. They were not studied. They were not in print. For most of the 20th century, if you wanted to read them, you had to find an archive that still had the original volumes. Then 2016 happened. Donald Trump won the presidential election, and someone, somewhere, found the books. What followed was not a slow academic rediscovery. It was an explosion. Within days, the coincidences were being listed, shared, screenshot, and sent across every platform. Within weeks, the books were selling for hundreds of dollars. And the more people looked, the more they found. Here is the first coincidence that stops people cold. The character's name is Baron Trump. Donald Trump's youngest son, born in 2006, is named Baron Trump. One extra letter. That's the entire difference. Now, names recur throughout history. Trump is a real surname. Baron is a real name. The overlap could be nothing more than statistical noise. But it is the entry point, the thing that makes you look at the rest of the list differently. Because once you see that name, you start reading the books through a different lens. And that lens keeps finding things. The second coincidence is the setting. Lockwood's Baron Trump lives in Castle Trump. Not a house, not an estate, a castle. Donald Trump built his career around towers that carry his name. Structures designed to project exactly the kind of medieval aristocratic grandeur that the word castle implies. Trump Tower in New York, Trump Castle in Atlantic City. The branding of the Trump name as synonymous with grand, imposing, built-to-impress architecture was a deliberate strategy. Lockwood built the same symbolism into his fictional world in 1888. Was that simply the obvious choice for a wealthy protagonist? Or is the parallel just too clean to be comfortable? The third coincidence goes deeper, much deeper. Both of the Baron Trump novels involve journeys that begin in Russia. In the books, Russia is the launching point, the departure zone, the place where the adventure originates before heading somewhere stranger and more hidden. In the years surrounding Donald Trump's 2016 election and presidency, the question of Russia became the defining investigation of his political life. The origins of things, the hidden connections, the journeys that began there, all of it became central to one of the most scrutinized periods in modern American political history. A boy whose adventures begin in Russia. A president whose most controversial chapter involved Russia. written in 1893, before any of it happened. Take a breath, because we are not done. The fourth coincidence involves a name that most people don't notice until someone points it out, and then they can't stop thinking about it. In the Baron Trump novels, the boy is guided in his travels by a mysterious older figure, a mentor, someone with wisdom and authority who helps direct the journey. That figure is referred to in the text as Don, just Don, not a full name, a title, a designation. Donald Trump's first name is Donald. His close allies, his family members, people who have known him for decades, many of them call him Don. And in Lockwood's books, written in the 19th century, the guiding presence behind the young baron's grand adventures carries that same name. Some people read that and shrug. Don is not an unusual word or name. It appears throughout European literature. The connection, they argue, is thin. And they may be right. But combined with everything else on this list, thin starts to feel like a relative term. The fifth coincidence is the one that tends to silence the room. In 1896, Lockwood published a third book, not a children's adventure this time, a short political novel titled 1900, or The Last President. In it, a populist outsider, a candidate the political establishment never expected and never wanted, wins a presidential election. The reaction in New York City is immediate and visceral. The wealthy neighborhoods panic. The old order feels threatened. The sense running through the book is that something unprecedented has just happened, something that the people in power do not know how to process. The story is set on Fifth Avenue. Donald Trump lived on Fifth Avenue. Trump Tower, his home and the symbolic headquarters of his empire for decades, sits on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. When Trump won the 2016 election, the reaction in certain parts of New York, among the media establishment, the political class, the cultural elite, was precisely what Lockwood described. Disbelief, panic. The sense that the rules had just been rewritten by someone who was never supposed to win. Lockwood wrote that scenario in 1896, 120 years before it happened. Now, here is where the skeptical voice needs to be heard, because this story doesn't work if we don't apply pressure to it. The rational explanation is real, and it deserves respect. Lockwood was writing about a type. The brash, wealthy, self-aggrandizing American man who treats the world like his personal stage was not invented by Donald Trump. He was a fixture of Gilded Age culture, which is exactly what Lockwood was observing and satirizing. Fifth Avenue was already the symbolic address of New York wealth. Trump is a real surname. Russia was a fashionable literary setting. Lockwood was drawing from the world around him, not predicting the future. And there is a concept in psychology called apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in unrelated information. Our brains did not evolve to be neutral. They evolved to find connections, to spot threats in noise, to build narratives from fragments. Which means we are biologically designed to see patterns that are not there. The Baron Trump phenomenon may be, in its entirety, a masterclass in how that process works at internet scale. That argument is coherent. It is probably, in significant part, correct. But there is a sixth coincidence that the debunkers tend to skip past quickly, and it involves a name that is harder to handwave than the others. In 1900, or The Last President, Lockwood's fictional administration includes a cabinet. That cabinet contains a Secretary of Agriculture. The name Lockwood gave to that character is Leif Pence. Pence. Mike Pence served as the Vice President of the United States under Donald Trump from 2017 to 2021. His surname is Pence. Not a common name, not a generic placeholder. Pence, sitting in a fictional Trump-adjacent political narrative published in 1896. Is it proof of something? No. Pence is a real surname. Lockwood drew his character names from the world around him. Coincidences involving surnames happen. None of this constitutes evidence of anything you could bring into a courtroom or publish in a peer-reviewed journal. But here is the question you have to sit with. At what point does a list of coincidences become something other than a list of coincidences? Is there a number? Is there a specificity threshold? Is there a moment where the rational explanation, however coherent, starts to feel like it's working harder than it should? Because there is something else. Something smaller, but somehow more unsettling than the names and the places. The character of Baron Trump in Lockwood's novels is not just wealthy and eccentric. He is specifically characterized as a boy who cannot accept limits, who finds every boundary an insult, who believes with complete sincerity that his perception of the world is more accurate than anyone else's, and that anyone who disagrees simply hasn't thought hard enough. He is restless in a way that exhausts the people around him. He is brilliant in his own estimation in a way that generates both loyalty and resentment. He never quite accepts that the journey is over. There is always another underground world to find, another hidden civilization to reach, another layer of reality that only he has the courage to pursue. You can decide for yourself how well that description maps onto the 45th President of the United States. But the description is in the text, written in 1888. Draw your own conclusions. Here is what we can say with certainty. The books are real. The names are real. The dates are real. The details are real. Ingersoll Lockwood was a genuine person with a genuine biography and a genuine satirical intent. He was not a prophet, and he was not a time traveler. He was a sharp, frustrated observer of American life who saw something in the culture around him and tried to put it into words. What he could not have known, what none of us can fully explain, is why those words would come back 130 years later and feel less like history and more like a blueprint. Maybe it's pattern recognition. Maybe it's apophenia on a civilizational scale. Maybe the archetype Lockwood was writing about is so enduring, so deeply American, that it was always going to produce a real-world counterpart eventually. And Donald Trump simply happened to be the one who fit the template most completely. Or maybe there is something in these books that shouldn't be there. Something specific enough and strange enough and detailed enough that the word coincidence starts to feel insufficient. You have the list now. You have the names, the places, the plot, the cabinet member, the personality. You have the rational argument, and you have the details the rational argument struggles to absorb. So tell me, where do you land? Is this an extraordinary coincidence, a product of a pattern-hungry internet, or something that we genuinely don't have the right category for yet? I want to know what you think, because I'm not sure anyone has the definitive answer. And that, more than any single coincidence on this list, is the most unsettling thing about the whole story.